The beautiful glow and luminosity of watercolour is one of its major attractions, and yet it's so easy to lose all that lovely glow and just end up with a bit of a muddy mess. There are a few reasons why that might happen, and that's what I want to go through with you this week and give you some ideas of how to avoid it. My name's Liz Chatterton. I'm a professional watercolour artist based in Berkshire, and every week I share a tip, trick or technique that I wish someone had told me when I started painting. And this week it's how to avoid mud. When people ask me, how do I keep my watercolours from going muddy? I usually say, what do you mean by muddy? Because muddy isn't about colours being muted. Let's look at this dog. Round its eyes, the colours are all quite neutral and muted, but they still have a luminosity. There is still light shining through them. So it's not about the actual mutedness of our colours. Muddy colours are when you've lost that shine and that glow that we associate with watercolours. Some people blame opaque colours. Some people blame granulating colours. Some people blame mixing too many colours into your colour mix. And I think sometimes that all plays a part, but actually that's not the real reason. And for me, there are basically two reasons why your watercolours go muddy, and that's what you're using and how you're using it, which may sound blindingly obvious, but let me break it down and I'll show you what I mean. So let's start off by looking at what we might be using that's contributing to those muddy watercolours. I've got a selection of watercolour pans here. There are basically three qualities of watercolour paint. There's artist quality, so the best pigments, really finely ground, most expensive. There's what we call student quality. This is my very first watercolour box, an old Daler Rowney one. And then there is cheap as chips quality. I bought this because I just thought the actual design was brilliant. Loved the design of it, but the paint is truly horrible. So both your artist and your student quality paint should be fine. There should be that. You cannot blame these paints if your colours go muddy, but you quite potentially can blame the cheap as chips. I pick out this green and put it there, and then let's grab something quite close. This is the student quality, and then grab something out. I don't know what would be closest. What colour is that? It's hard to tell on the palette. There we go. And then that's the artist quality. Now they're obviously not identical greens. Cheap as chips one was really hard to wet and get creamy colour off, and it will dry looking chalkier and just not as luminous as either the student or the artist quality. So I would suggest stuff you get from Poundland or from non-art supplies, the generic stuff that might come over by, container load. They've left the decent stuff out. Don't expect to be able to get glowing, beautiful watercolours. I actually intend to take the paints out of this and refill it with my tubes of artist quality so I can use this wonderful packaging, because I think that's brilliant. The second thing that might be holding you back is if your palette looks like this. If I wanted to mix some yellow and I put it there, straight away, I hope you can see, of course, that it's contaminated by the mess and gunge that was already on the palette. I put that on. That's not yellow, it's green, because there was probably a bit of green on my brush. There might be green in my water. It's muddied up on the palette. It's not that fresh, beautiful colour that potentially we were hoping for. So a dirty palette certainly doesn't help. Equally well, now I've contaminated the paint, That's not going to help, because even if I've got fresh water and I don't go into the palette to mix it, it's a bit better. It is a bit brighter, but there's still green in there. The other thing you've got to think about is your water pots. Suggest always using 2 water pots. Use one to do that initial clean of your brush, and then hopefully you have a clear one that's to mix your colours. You cannot mix beautiful clear colours with muddy water. It's impossible. So change your water often. And then the other supply that you're using, which might be contributing to your muddy colours, is of course your paper surface. It may be watercolour paper, but potentially it may not be great quality. And I would say you're on a limited budget and you need to decide to where to spend your money. You can use the student quality paints on a decent paper and get beautiful luminous colours. But if you use your lovely artist quality expensive paints on horrible paper, you're still not going to get those lovely luminous colours. Let's go and move on to looking at how we're using the supplies. So I said it was what we're using and potentially how we're using it. One of the biggest dangers is about overbrushing and overworking your surface. I see people going backwards and forwards, and what you're doing is sort of fluffing up the fibres. When the fibres of the paper get wet, they sort of fluff up and look like that. And by brushing backwards and forwards, you're forcing the pigment into those fibres, and then they sort of close down and as it dries and so forth, and that really dulls and takes away that luminosity. So you see people kind of doing this because frankly they haven't got a plan. They're not really sure what they're doing, and so they think as long as they keep their brush moving, well, life's going to be okay. Sadly, it's not. And I wonder how scientific we could be. I wonder if we could dry this patch, identical colour that I've just kept poking at, and this colour where I just touched it once. I wonder how different those would look. The other thing that people do is maybe they put down a nice fresh wash. We didn't overwork that. And they want to glaze over the top, maybe make it darker, maybe change the colour by putting a different colour over the top. And they don't wait till it's fully dry. If it's still at all damp, those little fibres are still a bit fluffed up, and that paint will move and you'll start pushing it into the fibres, and you'll possibly get cauliflowers and all the different things that can go wrong. So paint as it is now, you could work wet in wet by dropping other colour in, and you would still get nice fresh colours. That's no problem. But if we wait a bit longer, a minute or so, it won't be wet, it won't be dry, it'll be in a real danger period. You do anything then and that will certainly muddy up your colours. We'll just wait a few minutes, or a minute or so, and I'll show you what I mean. So if we look at this, most of the shine has gone off it, but it absolutely isn't dry. So if I decided I wanted to put a wash of red over the top, suddenly I've got muddy, yucky, mixed up colours. Whereas if I'd let it dry, it wouldn't go as muddy and disgusting. Now, if I combine the not dry with the over brushing, yeah, we really do start to create disgusting mud, which is very much related to in fact both of these things, is simply not planning. You don't know where you're going, and that leads to total fiddling. So you get to the point with your painting, you painted and you think, oh yeah, right, what shall I do next? Oh yeah, let's just brush that in. Yeah, I don't know. What shall I do next? Oh yeah, I know what I'll do. I'll yeah, add in a bit of blue. That'd be good. Yeah, that's great. Oh, yeah, that's not quite what I expected. Oh, I know. I'll add in, another colour. Yeah, that'll sort it. Oh, that hasn't sorted it out. Oh, bother. Okay, I'll yeah, keep going. And that's what happens, and you end up with that muddy mess. The remedy is really quite straightforward in terms of, have a plan, know what you want to do, stop when you've done what you've wanted to do. And my top tip is maybe stopping too soon rather than too late. I'd say get to, 90% of the way through your painting and then stop. Go and make a cup of tea. Even better, sleep on it overnight and then look again. And you might be very pleasantly surprised that actually you're not 90% through, you're 100% through. And this will really stop you with this over brushing. The not drying enough, well, you've just sadly got to learn to be patient with watercolour, and the way to tell whether your wash is dry or not is to use the back of your hand. If it still feels cool, that means there's water in the paper, you need to leave it alone. If it feels room temperature, then it's dry and you're good to go and you won't muddy those colours up. So I hope that was helpful. You've seen what you use, the paints, whether you've got a clean palette, whether you've got clean water, whether you've got clean paints, the quality of those paints and the quality of the paper will all contribute. And then it's having a plan so you don't overbrush, you don't try and layer when things aren't dry, and you stop in plenty of time. All of those will contribute to having beautiful, luminous watercolours.